The midday sun blazed over Arlington National Cemetery, casting long, clean shadows along the marble stones. The air was still so still that even the faint clicking of the tomb, guards' heels against the granite path, echoed like a heartbeat. His uniform was flawless, creases sharp as blades, brass gleaming, rifle balanced perfectly in his right hand. Every movement was deliberate, rehearsed, sacred. The spectators around the tomb of the unknown soldier watched in respectful silence, the weight of history pressing gently on their chests. Then, the silence broke. A man's voice, rough, mocking, cut through the air. "Hey, soldier boy, how hard can it be to walk back and forth all day?" Laughter followed, low and mean. The guard didn't flinch. He continued his measured steps, eyes fixed ahead. Bound by discipline older than himself, the heckler, a broad-shouldered man in a gray shirt, stepped closer to the barrier. The tourists shifted uneasily. One whispered, "He shouldn't be doing that." But the man didn't care. He smirked and called again, louder this time. "What? Too scared to look at me?" The guard turned, pivoting cleanly, rifle snapping to position against his shoulder. His voice was calm but carried the force of command. "Remain silent and stand back. This is a place of honor." The thug sneered. "Yeah? What are you gonna do if I don't?" He reached out suddenly, grabbing the soldier's forearm. Gasps erupted from the crowd. For one frozen second, the world stopped. Then, it happened swift as lightning. The tomb guard's body shifted, no wasted motion, no hesitation. His free arm locked under the thug's wrist. A precise twist, a controlled push. The man stumbled back, eyes wide with shock and pain. He tried to speak, but his words tangled in his throat. The soldier had already returned to his post, posture flawless, eyes forward. "Step away from the tomb." His voice was steel. The crowd said nothing. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. The thug looked around, expecting laughter, but found only cold stares. His smirk melted into shame. Without another word, he turned and walked away. The guard continued his slow, solemn march, unmoved, unbroken, the rhythm of duty restored. And for the rest of that afternoon, not a single sound dared disturb the sacred ground again. The afternoon sun had begun to sink, softening the harsh gleam of marble. The tomb guard's boots clicked in measured rhythm, the sound of precision, of purpose. Yet behind that calm exterior, a trace of tension lingered. He never allowed emotion to show, but discipline did not mean numbness. Every soldier at Arlington knew what had happened hours earlier. The story had already spread like wildfire. A man had dared to lay hands on the sentinel of the unknown. Now, the cemetery was even quieter than usual. Tourists moved slower, speaking in whispers, their eyes filled with newfound reverence. The guard's shift was not over. Protocol demanded exact timing, no matter what had occurred. His replacement, Sergeant D. Harlow, 32 years old, waited under the shade of the far colonnade, inspecting his rifle as if to erase the memory of the incident through ritual. At the commander's office, Captain Reeves, 41 years old, watched the scene on a small monitor. His jaw was tight. He handled it by the book, Reeves murmured to himself. But the weight of public scrutiny would come soon. Any disturbance, no matter how justified, became national news. Back on the plaza, the guard's rotation neared its end. Sweat formed beneath his collar, but his movements remained perfect. 21 steps down, 21 seconds of silence, a precise turn, and back again. The rhythm was his anchor, a sacred pattern that allowed no weakness. Then came the low murmur of a new crowd gathering. Among them stood a woman, about 26 years old, auburn hair tied neatly, wearing a simple white dress. She wasn't a tourist. Her posture was too still, her gaze too intent. She watched the guard not with curiosity, but gratitude. Her brother had been one of the unknown, a soldier who never came home. The wind shifted. rustling through the cypress trees. The faint smell of cut grass mingled with polished metal as the ceremony for the shift change began. 2 guards marched in perfect synchronization. The sergeant approached, voice clear. "Post and orders remain as directed." "Orders acknowledged, Sergeant." Their rifles crossed briefly in the ritual of exchange, precise, rehearsed, timeless. But in that instant, the younger guard felt a tremor deep within his chest, not of fear, but of something heavier, the realization that the tomb he guarded wasn't only a symbol, it was a grave for every nameless sacrifice. From the crowd, the young woman pressed a folded letter against her chest. Her lips moved silently, a prayer or a thank you. When the ceremony ended, the new guard took post. The relieved sentinel turned sharply, marching away down the corridor. Behind him, the echoes of his steps faded like a drumbeat, receding into history. In the command room, Captain Reeves finally exhaled. "The world saw discipline today," he said quietly to Harlow. "And discipline," he added, "is what separates a soldier from a man with a weapon." That night, under a pale moon, the guard sat alone on the barracks porch. His gloves were folded neatly beside him, rifle locked away. The silence of Arlington stretched around him, eternal and vast. He looked out over the dark rows of headstones, thousands of them, and whispered, "For you." Somewhere among those stones lay the unknown soldier he had sworn to protect. And somewhere in the darkness, the echo of his vow, to never falter, never forget, carried softly on the night wind. By dawn, the peace of Arlington had already been disturbed, not by sound, but by headlines. Tomb guard confrontation sparks debate online, blazed across morning news feeds. Clips of the incident had spread overnight. The guard's perfect composure, the thug's arrogance, the silent awe of the crowd. Everyone had an opinion, but few understood the code, the ritual of precision, the weight behind every salute and step. Inside the tomb guard barracks, the atmosphere was heavy. The 28-year-old guard sat at the long oak table, coffee untouched, staring at the muted television. Commentators spoke in rapid tones, some praising his discipline, others questioning the use of physical force. Across from him, Sergeant Harlow, 32 years old, leaned back, arms crossed. "They weren't there," he muttered. "They didn't hear the man's tone. Didn't see his hand grab you." "Doesn't matter," the guard replied quietly. His eyes never left the screen. "They only see the clip 10 seconds, without context." Moments later, Captain Reeves, 41 years old, entered the room, file in hand. "Gentlemen," he said, voice controlled but tense, "we're being called to HQ. The brass wants a report and a public statement." The guard stood immediately. "Yes, sir." Reeves nodded once. "You did nothing wrong. But in this world, optics matter more than truth." The ride to headquarters was silent. Washington traffic hummed around them, distant and indifferent. When they arrived, the air inside the building was thick with fluorescent light and bureaucracy. In a small conference room sat 3 officers and a civilian representative from the Department of Public Affairs, a 45-year-old woman. "Sharp suit, sharp eyes," she began. "This video has over 2 million views. The public reaction is divided. Some call your actions heroic. Others call it excessive. We need to shape the narrative quickly." Captain Reeves kept his posture straight. "Ma'am, my sentinel acted within regulations." The civilian breached the barrier and made physical contact. The guard neutralized without harm. The woman nodded slightly. "Yes, but perception is everything. We're drafting an official statement emphasizing restraint and professionalism. We'll release it within the hour." The guard remained silent, gaze fixed on the table's polished surface. He had stood watch for years, rain or shine, through freezing dawns and endless nights. But now, a few seconds of duty were being dissected by strangers. After the meeting, Reeves dismissed him. Go clear your head. You'll be off rotation for 72 hours. Outside, the sun glared off the Potomac, blinding and white. The guard walked without direction until he reached the western gate of the cemetery, the public side, where tourists milled. There, among the quiet hum of footsteps, he saw her again, the 26-year-old woman from the previous day. The one with the auburn hair and the letter. She approached hesitantly, eyes soft but determined. "I saw you," she said. "Everyone saw you. But I just wanted to say, thank you." He blinked, caught off guard. "For what?" "For not letting disrespect win," she whispered. "My brother, he's one of the names that aren't spoken. You protected that silence." He looked at her, unsure how to respond. Words seemed too fragile for a place built on sacrifice. When she left, the wind rose slightly, carrying the faint scent of lilacs from a nearby memorial. He turned back toward the rows of graves, their white stones gleaming like silent sentinels in the sun. Maybe the world could debate right and wrong forever, but here, among the unknown, the truth was carved in stillness. Honor needed no explanation. 3 nights had passed since the incident. The 28-year-old guard hadn't slept well since. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw that moment replay, the hand grabbing his arm, the crowd's gasp, and the weight of command in his own voice. Outside his quarters, the rhythm of the changing guard continued like a heartbeat, precise, unbroken, eternal. But inside, the silence pressed heavier than the midnight air. He stood before the mirror in his uniform, polishing his rifle for the 5th time, though it already gleamed. Routine was supposed to be comfort. But now, it felt like a cage. A soft knock came at the door. It was Sergeant Harlow, 32 years old, his expression unreadable. "HQ wants a follow-up statement tomorrow," he said. "The review board's been digging through every frame of that footage." The guard nodded. "I followed protocol." "I know you did," Harlow said, leaning against the doorframe. "But that doesn't mean they'll see it that way." There was a pause, the kind that soldiers knew too well. Duty didn't always come with fairness. When Harlow left, the guard sat down on the edge of his bunk, staring at the photograph taped to his locker. His first day as a sentinel. Standing rigid under the summer sun, his eyes full of something close to faith. He wondered when that certainty had started to fade. The next afternoon, he found himself walking again toward the public gate. He wasn't supposed to, not in uniform, not off rotation. But something pulled him there, and she was there. The 26-year-old woman, auburn hair loose this time, holding a single white rose. She smiled faintly when she saw him. "You came back." "I shouldn't have," he said. "Sometimes rules aren't the same as right." She replied softly. They walked along the path, gravel crunching beneath their steps. For a while, they didn't speak. Then she said, "You know, my brother, he wanted to be a guard once. He said it wasn't about the uniform. It was about protecting silence." He turned to her. "Silence?" She nodded. "The kind of silence that means peace. That no one can disturb." He understood, maybe too well. They stopped near Section 60, where fresh graves marked the cost of the last decade. The woman placed the rose gently on the grass, whispering something he couldn't hear. "You keep everyone safe," she said, looking up at him. "Even when the world doesn't understand it." He wanted to believe her. But the doubts clawed at him. If they don't understand, does it still mean anything? She looked at him for a long moment. "It means everything, because you do it anyway." The wind rose, carrying a faint scent of rain. The first drops began to fall, soft against the marble stones. Neither of them moved. Then her phone buzzed. She checked it, a notification. "They're airing the full report," she said quietly. "You might want to see it." He nodded once, his throat tightening. "I'll watch it when I'm ready." When she left, he remained standing among the rows. rain darkening the fabric of his uniform, somewhere behind him. The changing of the guard echoed again, precise, mechanical, eternal. But this time, it sounded less like duty and more like defiance. By the time dawn broke, the world already had an opinion. Clips of the incident flooded every social platform. 10 seconds of confrontation stripped from context, looped endlessly under flashing headlines. Guard assaults civilian at National Memorial. The 28-year-old guard sat in the review room, hands folded tight, eyes fixed on the blank wall in front of him. Across the table sat Major Dawson, 45 years old, the Internal Affairs officer. His eyes were cold, surgical, the kind that measured truth not by feeling, but by rules. "Your actions," Dawson began, "have triggered national attention. The command wants clarity. Why did you engage physical contact first?" "I didn't engage," the guard said evenly. "He grabbed me. I followed the protocol for non-compliant contact." Dawson flipped through a printed report. "Protocol doesn't account for being recorded. Optics matter." The guard met his eyes. "Optics don't change what's right." The older man exhaled slowly, setting down his pen. "You sound like a soldier from another time." When the questioning ended, the guard walked out into the courtyard. The morning was cold, gray, and heavy with mist. Across the distance, tourists gathered behind the ropes, whispering. He could feel their eyes tracing him like a target. That afternoon, the first official statement aired live. Words like unnecessary force, pending review, administrative leave crawled across every channel. He turned off the screen. Silence filled the room again. The knock at his door came quietly this time. It was the 26-year-old woman, her face drawn with worry. "They suspended you," she said softly. He nodded. "Effective immediately." "I saw the comments," she continued, voice trembling. "Half of them don't even know what really happened." He smiled faintly, a small tired curve of the lips. "They don't need to. Their truth is louder." She stepped closer, clutching the strap of her bag. "What are you going to do now?" "Wait," he said. "And keep silent." "That's what we do." The silence between them stretched until it hurt. Then she whispered, "Silence isn't the same as peace, you know." He looked at her, the weight in his eyes almost breaking. "Sometimes it's all we have left." That night, alone again, he took off his uniform and laid it across the bed. The gold trim, the polished buttons, all perfect, all meaningless without the right to wear them. He walked outside, toward the memorial, ignoring the drizzle that had started to fall. The night guards recognized him, but didn't stop him. He stood by the tomb again, where the air hummed with memory and rain. The marble glistened under the dim floodlights. His reflection wavered in the wet stone. Somewhere behind him, the city glowed, restless. Indifferent. He whispered the same vow he'd repeated 100 times before. "Here rests, in honored glory, an American soldier known but to God." And for the first time, the words hurt. The full video surfaced on a quiet Thursday morning. No headline. No breaking news. Just a silent upload on a veterans forum, a shaky camera, angle showing everything that the viral clip had cut away. The thug had grabbed first. The guard had reacted by the book, calm, precise, restrained. The truth was there, clear as daylight. But by then, the world had already moved on. The 28-year-old American soldier stood outside the HQ, hands in his pockets, watching the gray sky stretch over Washington, D.C. Reporters no longer waited outside. The noise had vanished, replaced by something worse, indifference. His phone buzzed. A message from Sergeant Harlow, 32-year-old American male. HQ reviewed it. "You're cleared. Report in tomorrow." Cleared. The word felt hollow. When he entered the office, the same Major Dawson, 45-year-old American male, met him with a neutral tone. "The investigation's closed. You're reinstated." The guard nodded. Does the public know? Dawson sighed. They don't care. The story's old now. He saluted, then left the room. The hallway echoed with the sound of his boots, each step measured, just like the ceremony he had perfected. But something inside him no longer aligned with that rhythm. Later that day, he returned to the tomb. The October wind carried a faint chill, sweeping dry leaves across the marble. The silence felt familiar again, but this time it was heavier, more aware. As he walked the perimeter, he noticed someone standing near the gate, the 26-year-old American woman with auburn hair. She held her phone, eyes damp but smiling softly when she saw him. They cleared you, she said. They did, he replied quietly. That's good news. He hesitated. Maybe, but no one saw it. No one shared the truth. She stepped closer. That doesn't make it any less true. For a long moment, they stood facing each other, the hum of distant traffic mixing with the flag rustling above them. You know, she said softly, you remind me of this place. He tilted his head. How so? People pass by, take pictures, move on. They never really see what it means. But you keep standing here anyway. He looked toward the tomb, the carved words gleaming in the fading light. It's not about being seen, he said. It's about being there when it matters. The sun dipped low, painting the horizon in copper and violet. The American flag waved slowly above them, and for the first time in weeks, the guard felt something close to peace. He turned to her. Thank you. For believing when no one else did. She smiled through the tears. It's what you would have done. And for a brief second, silence didn't feel like punishment anymore. It felt like honor. The morning air was crisp, the kind of cold that sharpened every breath. Rows of chairs lined the marble courtyard, cameras stationed behind barriers, and an ocean of faces waited under the fluttering red, white, and blue of the American flag. The 28-year-old American soldier adjusted the cuff of his ceremonial gloves. His reflection in the polished stone was calm, maybe too calm. Inside, 1,000 unspoken things stirred. But none of them would show. It was Veterans Day, the day the tomb guard was to resume duty before the public. His first return since the scandal. Major Dawson, now with a softer expression, stepped beside him. You ready, son? Yes, sir, he replied. His voice steady, his posture perfect. Good, Dawson said quietly. Then make them remember why silence matters. The brass band began its slow, solemn tune as the crowd hushed. The soldier marched forward, steps measured, precise, each one echoing against the marble with the weight of history. The tomb stood ahead, draped in wreaths and surrounded by honor guards. The inscription caught the light. Here rests in honored glory an American soldier known but to God. He halted, turned, and faced the crowd. For a heartbeat, time stopped. Cameras clicked. The air itself seemed to wait. He drew his rifle, flipped it with practiced grace, and took his place before the tomb. The movement, once routine, now carried something sacred. Every breath, every pivot, every second of silence became an act of defiance against the world's noise. And then, in the front row, he saw her, the 26-year-old American woman. She wasn't filming, wasn't talking. She simply stood with her hand over her heart, eyes locked on him. Their gaze met for just an instant, but it was enough. The ceremony continued. Wreaths were laid. The anthem played. Veterans saluted. He didn't move an inch, even when the sunlight stung his eyes. After the final salute, Dawson approached the podium. Today we remember not just those who served, he said. His voice firm, but those who stood for honor when it was hardest to do so. The soldier didn't flinch, didn't smile, but something in his chest loosened. When the ceremony ended, the crowd began to disperse. Some reporters lingered, but no one shouted questions. No one accused. The woman approached slowly, sunlight in her hair, the faintest smile on her lips. "You did it," she said softly. He exhaled. "No, we did. You kept believing." She looked toward the horizon, where the flag rippled in the golden wind. "Maybe that's what honor really is, believing even when no one else does." He nodded. "And standing still when everything tries to move you." The sky turned amber as the sun dipped behind the Capitol dome. The marble reflected the colors, red, gold, white, until the whole scene looked almost unreal. He turned back to the tomb, the rifle steady against his shoulder, and for the first time, the silence felt like music. The courtyard was quieter than it had been all day. The sun hung low, drenching Arlington in a golden-orange haze that reflected off the polished marble. The 28-year-old American soldier adjusted his gloves one last time, feeling the weight of the rifle, the uniform, and the legacy he had inherited and reclaimed. Today marked not just the completion of a formal ceremony, but a personal reckoning. After months of silent judgment, whispered doubts, and lingering mistrust, he had walked the line of honor once more. And this time, the world had seen him as he truly was. The 26-year-old woman approached, her auburn hair catching the last rays of sunlight, eyes filled with quiet admiration. She didn't speak immediately, allowing the gravity of the moment to settle between them. Around them, the American flags fluttered gently in the evening breeze, as if saluting the persistence of duty and courage. "You've done it," she said finally, her voice soft yet certain. He lowered his rifle slightly. "We've done it," he corrected, a small, genuine smile breaking through his usual composure. "I couldn't have faced all of this. Not without you." She extended her hand, and for a moment, words were unnecessary. The sky above them was painted in streaks of crimson and gold. The Capitol dome far in the distance bathed in twilight, a silent witness to both the end of a trial and the beginning of something new. He took a deep breath, the familiar rhythm of his military training grounding him. Every step he had taken, every hour of silent vigil, had led to this intersection of duty and freedom. The tomb of the unknown soldier stood still and solemn, a stark reminder of sacrifice. Around them, visitors were dispersing, some capturing the scene on cameras, others simply taking a moment to honor the ritual. "Are you leaving?" she asked cautiously, reading the hesitation in his posture. He looked out over the courtyard, the setting sun reflecting in his blue eyes. "I've served my country with every ounce of loyalty," he said. "Now, it's time to serve a life worth living outside these walls. But my oath, my honor, that doesn't end here." She smiled, understanding the depth behind his words. Together, they walked along the marble path, the American flags lining their way like silent guardians of the past. Each step forward a testament to survival, resilience, and newfound hope. As they reached the edge of the courtyard, the wind picked up slightly, carrying with it the faint sound of a military band beginning a distant melody, a farewell, an honoring, a promise. He paused, turning back for a single glance at the tomb. It was more than stone and ceremony. It was the crucible that had shaped him, tested him, and allowed him to stand tall again. "Let's go," she said, her hand finding his, warmth radiating in contrast to the cool evening air. He nodded. And together, under the vast American sky, they stepped forward, leaving behind the shadows of duty but carrying the light of honor, ready to face whatever dawn awaited.